Let's discuss a couple more SOHO router configurations you should know, including MAC filtering, quality of service, and universal plug and play. We'll start with MAC filtering. That's the screening of computers that are allowed to access a device or network. And so, for example, we have a basic SOHO router here. You can screen out or filter out whatever computers are connecting in a wired fashion or a wireless fashion, and you do it by the MAC address. Let's show an example of this. This is a wireless router that we've been working with in the past in other videos. I'm going to go to Advanced, and I'm going to go down to Security and Access Control, because sometimes some manufacturers call MAC filtering access control, and that's what it is. And so if we take a look here, we see we have access control, MAC filtering, which is disabled right now. It is turned off. So if we want to use it, we have to first turn it on. And then we need to select the access mode, the way we're going to do this. Two options. We can do blacklisting, and a better name for that would be denying access to the network. Or we could do whitelisting, which is allowing specific access to the network. And we could specify which computers by MAC address we want to either deny or allow. Now, in larger networks, generally the way you do it is you deny the computers that you don't want connecting. Because if you were to allow all the computers, there'd be a lot of MAC addresses to add. That would be a big job. In a smaller network, in a small office or in a home, you might select a whitelist because you might only have 2, 3, 4 devices that need to connect. But more often, you choose the blacklist. You would deny access. And so if we look down here, first of all, we'd want to save those options. Okay, and if we look down here, it's nice because this device shows the devices that are connected currently. So if you see any devices at that time that you don't want connected, you could then add them to that list, to that MAC filtering list. And we see I am connected as this workstation that I'm working at here, AV Editor, its IP address, and its MAC address. And this is a wired connection, so it'll tell you which is which. Now, it could be that the computer you want to deny is not on this list. Maybe you were auditing some logs. Maybe you were reviewing some logs, and you saw some computers that you didn't want to connect. Or perhaps someone is being offboarded from a company. They've been terminated, or they've resigned, or their contract is over. And, you know, it's not enough to just say, okay, we're going to disable your user account. You also want to deny access to any systems that they might have connected from in the past. Okay, so we could add devices. Now, to do that, we need to know the MAC address of the system. So you can find that out in the command line of any operating system. For example, let's go to a Windows 7 computer I have running here. We'll go to the command line, and we're in the command prompt. Now, what you would do is you would do an ipconfig, but you have to add on the /all in order to get more information, including that MAC address. So we'll press enter, and we see our local area connection Ethernet adapter. And that's, let's say that's what we wanted to block or deny. Well, we need to know this physical address. That is the MAC address. That is the one that's burned into the network adapter or network interface card. And that's, you know, it's one thing to try and block IP addresses, which you could do in a lot of ways, but an IP address is easy to change. And we showed how to change that manually or statically. So it's better to go down to the data link layer and that MAC address that's actually burned into the network adapter, because that goes beyond the operating system. It goes to the physical. And it's a lot harder to change or mask this MAC address. So we need to know this MAC address, and a good idea to know the IP address as well. And then we'd go back to our SOHO router and then add a device. Okay. Now, in this case, the name of the computer, really not that important. I'll say Win7-VM1, but it's the MAC address that we really want to know here. Now, in some cases, you can separate the octets of the MAC address by dashes. In some cases, you have to use colons. Depends on the system. Let's see what this allows us to do. This is going to be 00-0C-29-0C-FB-C2. Now, this is actually a virtual machine, so this is a virtual MAC address, but you can block virtual MAC addresses as well. Okay, we'll click OK, and that adds it on. That MAC address is now blocked, and it won't be able to access that SOHO router. It won't be able to send data through the switch ports to the other computers. All of those packets will be blocked and discarded from that MAC address. And you could add additional computers as you wish to this blacklist, and each of those systems, at least those network adapters, will be denied. But again, you could also set it up as a whitelist. And if we did that, then we would be specifying the computers that are allowed to connect, and anybody else who tries to connect will not be able to do so. So you have to be really careful with that and make sure that you have all the systems that you need, because you might forget later on, hey, if we add a new computer, hey, I can't connect to the network. What's going on? Well, that computer hasn't been added to the whitelist yet. So you might not see that as often, and more likely in very small network environments. But it's possible that you could see either one. So understand that blacklisting is denying access and whitelisting is allowing access, and that MAC filtering may also be known as access control. Next, let's talk about quality of service. QoS is a feature that attempts to prioritize data for specific computers or for specific programs. It could be that you want to prioritize certain types of data. For example, remote desktop protocol traffic, RDP traffic, or maybe streaming media, or gaming, or voice over IP phone calls, or audio and video playback. There's a lot of possibilities with this. Let's take a look at our router once again. And we'll go down here right to QoS, and we'll go to settings. So we have a couple options here, and so let's take a look. First of all, if you want to use it, you have to enable it. And then you could specify maximum upload and download bandwidth from here. You can specify the amount that you want to do. And some people like to try to increase this past the max, but it's not really going to work because the port is limited to, in this case, 1,000 megabits per second. It's full duplex, so it does that in both directions simultaneously, but that's it. You have your upload and download of 1,000 megabits per second. Now, we can prioritize things in 3 different levels here. We can set things as high priority, which will give 60% of the router's processing power and network power. We have middle priority, which is 30%, and low priority, which is 10%. But we can adjust these as we wish. We can make it a little bit less for each of these. We'll leave them as the default, and we'll save this since we're actually enabling QoS. That's going to restart the QoS engine. Okay, and now we'll go down to the QoS rule list. We have our high priority, middle priority, and low priority. Let's say that I wanted to add a computer that'll have the highest level of priority to the router. I click on Add. And once again, like with MAC filtering, we'd have to do it by the MAC address. We can view existing devices. The only one I have here is AV Editor, but let's say we chose that, it would add that information in, or we could do it manually by device name and the important part, the MAC address. And then click OK. So that computer would then get the high priority here. Or it could be that and by the way, you could add the other computers to middle priority. They would get lower priority to the router. Now, you got to balance this with availability and with functionality and productivity of your business, but things to think about there. Now, if we click add again, we can also do this by application. And here's a list of possible applications that they have built in here. So let's say that we're using Vonage for voice over IP through the network. That could be something that you want to prioritize so it doesn't drop phone calls, because that can happen. Or maybe web server access, or maybe SSH. I mentioned RDP. Maybe it's FTP. It all depends on what you care the most about. And it could be something that's not listed here. Then you have two options. The first option is to go to your database. That's the database setting here. And look at the database that you have. It could be that you could possibly upgrade this database to a newer version that includes more applications and more ports. Or we could go down and add, once again, by application, and go down to custom application. And there we would specify what the protocol is that's being used and the port number for the specific protocol. So let's say we wanted it to be something like HTTP. Well, we'd have to specify TCP, and then we'd specify port 80 or port 443. Gamers will do this type of thing, and they'll specify particular ports like 27960 or whatever, and they'll specify that as UDP or whatever the game actually uses, and then specify that actual port number and give it a name. The name doesn't really matter as much, but you should name it based on whatever it is, the application that you're working with. So you can get past just the built-in ones by knowing the port number of the application that you're using, and then also whether it uses TCP or UDP, or just leave it as all or both. All right? So a couple ways to do that. And it could be that maybe FTP you want as a low priority. Because FTP is usually throttled anyway, and it's super slow in most applications. You might get 1 megabit per second or something on a typical connection in FileZilla. So we might select FTP. And click OK. I have to get rid of the custom here. Click FTP, click OK, and that'll add that to the low priority list for everyone. Okay, so you can do it by computers or by application, and you can throttle the entire bandwidth, upload and download within the router. So some pretty cool stuff, quality of service. And again, a lot of people will do this for gaming, possibly remote desktop traffic because the video it requires, or the streaming of media like video, because video, it needs, I think, 20 megabits per second per video stream to have a quality high-def video stream. Now, with many SOHO routers, if you do decide to use quality of service, there are usually other services that will either be disabled or you'll have to disable them first. One example of those is NAT Boost, Network Address Translation Boost. And if we go to System Tools and go to System Parameters, getting deep into here, we'll see NAT Boost here. NAT is running, of course. We want that normally. It could be that you'd want to do straight pass-through of your IP address, but generally you want network address translation so you can have multiple systems connecting through. But going beyond that, NAT Boost, which may also be referred to as NAT acceleration, is designed to speed up internet connections. And so on a device like this, because quality of service also does throttling and it prioritizes the internet connection, you can't use both at the same time because there would be some conflicts. You also can't run traffic statistics if you're running one of the others. So you'd have to actually disable this first, that NAT boost, before you could use QoS. And lastly on the list, we have Universal Plug and Play, UPnP. That's a group of networking protocols that allows computers and printers and other internet-ready devices, it allows them to discover each other on the network. This is a consumer level technology. It's not meant for the enterprise. It's consumer level technology that's designed to make networking easier for the user. So for example, if you wanted easier accessibility and connectivity of a PC and a smartphone and a printer that were all connected to the SOHO router, then UPnP could provide that for you. However, it's often recommended that you disable this function if you're concerned about security. For example, if you're running some IoT, some Internet of Things based devices. So let's go back to our router here. And in this case, we'll go to NAT forwarding and UPnP. And we can see that's on right now, but we don't have any UPnP related devices connecting. We could refresh this, but we're not going to have any right now. If you had printers or specific mobile devices or connected devices to a PC, then it would show the IP address and the protocol and ports being used for that and for those services. But again, in a lot of cases, you know, if you're in a small office, you probably want to disable this altogether. But it can make it easier for mobile devices and PCs and printers to all communicate with each other and see each other more automatically, so to speak. So a little bit about UPnP. Okay, so those are the three additional router configurations: MAC filtering, QoS, and UPnP. I definitely focus on the MAC filtering and QoS because I'm sure you'll use it, and I'm sure you'll see some questions on the exam as well. So that's it for this video.